This is a videotape. As you can see, it's The Great Adventure, the stories of the Bible, and my grandma used to have a whole collection of these at her house. When I was 10 years old, my grandparents had a house fire, and I'm the oldest out of 10 grandkids, 3 of whom weren't even born at that time. But I think the immense change that the fire brought, having lost a lot of the toys that I loved, but that immense change really put in me a sense of fragility, that the world was somehow more fragile at the time, and that things should be saved. It actually was around Thanksgiving time, 1997, and that was one of the first times that I saw how influential my grandparents were in the community, and how much the community came through providing a place for them to stay, clothes for them, food, and other household items in, one of their darkest times of need. My grandparents had built their life's foundation on the rock of Christ, and that's what really impacted me throughout all these years. And after they recovered from the loss of their house, seeing their integrity still in place and their faith still in place has impacted me the most. So, by age 15, my parents had divorced. So my mom, my 2 brothers, and my sister, all younger than I, we moved from the rural areas of Dansville, the sticks, down into the town of Dansville. And so my second item is my NIV Teen Devotional Bible, which my grandma, same grandma, had gotten me in 2000. And that was when my depression hit the worst. I remember thinking, if no one else is going to care about me, I should start caring about myself. I know that a lot of people care deeply for me, but I wasn't ready to accept that. I was emotionally recluse and unable to cope with the stress that life was throwing at me. What helped me the most, though, was building that strong foundation in the church and on my friends at youth group. Our youth group, we never really talked deeply about our home lives. We always had fun, and just enjoying ourselves and being in the moment was more important than trying to deal with issues at home, from what I remember. It was always just a relief to have a good time without thinking about our home situations. High school was also a time of self-discovery. I became more politically minded. After 9/11, I opposed Bush's Second Gulf War. I started exploring the hippie culture and the 60s and 70s. I was fascinated by the music of the 70s, the clothing. I never partook of drugs or alcohol or dating in the 5 years of high school. I also became fascinated with reading and English literature. I loved my English classes that I had. I was especially drawn to poetry, and though I never had any formal training in poetry, I enjoyed it at face value without knowing about the metaphor, simile, or abstract thoughts behind poetry. But socially, youth group, the church group, my friends from there, was the most central thing to my life in my high school years. I feel that it led me to know that I could have amazing experiences without the stereotypical teen party life. My third item is actually this underlay, the poncho that I'm using. I bought on a road trip during college when I was 19. I bought this thing and I've had it ever since. I never planned to go to college. I never took an SAT, and I never asked my high school to help me apply for colleges. Never looked at a scholarship, anything like that. None of it. Then, a year after high school, when I was about 20, I started GCC in Batavia. My first semester, I took 18 credits, and I loved what we were learning, but I barely passed with a D average. At the time, I felt a disconnect from the anchor that was my church. I started attending the Northgate Church in Batavia, but primarily I focused on the Wednesday night college group because that was where I was most welcomed and that was where I felt most comfortable with people my own age. I started my obsession with road trips in college. I remember a sense of freedom and of choice, and I took my young adult freedom at liberty when my friend and I drove down to Ohio over President's Day weekend in February and subsequently rear-ended a guy in a back road hundreds of miles from home and had to rely on one of his friends and my mom to get us back to New York in the middle of a snowstorm. But through all of that, God was always there the whole time. I would read my Bible and ask questions to myself, but I never had a specific spiritual mentor or somebody who I could really talk to deeply about spiritual matters. And I think that is what would have made a bigger difference in my life had I had that. So this is my wedding band. We had a cheap $15 silver wedding band, and it's now tarnished, very symbolic of my marriage. By the age of 25, I was married with 2 kids, working at a job I hated in a relationship without a biblical foundation for our marriage. I allowed myself to be blinded by the abuse I was enduring and perpetuating at the time. I felt that I was not allowed to see my friends or my family, and frankly, my family didn't want much to do with me and my wife. And we ended up living a fast, hard life of drugs, sex, rock and roll, together with our mental health diagnoses, and trying to parent while holding a job and paying bills. To put it delicately, I was not myself anymore. I was a bottle of carbonated rage with the lid screwed on too tight. Everything negative that my wife did would shake up my bottle more and more and more, and the pressure would build and build. And then one day, the cork popped off. 3 days before my son's first birthday, I lost control of myself and ended up getting myself arrested. I was released on my own recognizances that night, but I was also subjugated to the court system, to CPS, the Child Protective Services, and I was unable to see my children for a year due to multiple restraining orders. 5 years after the divorce, after all the horrific, unbelievable things that went on, I was finally able, by age 30, to begin the process of really healing and reassessing my life, trying not to dwell on the mistakes of my past, but moving forward. By my 30th birthday, I'd gained residential custody of my 2 kids, getting my bachelor's degree, and finally realizing my role as a father. I'd never really taken my role as father seriously when I was married, so that's been a huge learning curve for me over the past few years. I see now my responsibilities towards them and the ties I need to cut off with my selfishness. I need to learn who I am in this role and who I want my children to see in this role. In the 2 years since my 30th birthday, my faith is newborn. Though I had the Bible stories at the beginning of my life, I can finally realize what Christ means to me, the stability that He gives. Sometimes you have to destroy the old foundation in order to build a new house on the solid foundation of Christ.